Welcome back to the Insight Report, the podcast where we look beyond the numbers to understand the forces that truly shape our world. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're tackling a topic that affects every single one of us. Whether we're trading on Wall Street or just managing our 401k, the human factor in financial risk. To help us navigate the psychological minefield of money, I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Dr. Jordan Hayes. Jordan is a behavioral finance expert, a former fund manager, and the author of the upcoming book, The Investor Within. Jordan, thanks for joining us.
Alex, it's a pleasure to be here. This is one of my favorite topics, primarily because it debunks decades of traditional economic theory.
That's a great place to start. For decades, the entire financial world operated on this idea of the Homo economicus, the perfectly rational investor. Why is that concept finally failing us, and why does this topic matter so much right now?
It's failing us because it was never real. The Homo economicus is this elegant, clean model, a person who always maximizes utility, always acts logically, and never lets emotion interfere. But if that person actually existed, we wouldn't have bubbles, we wouldn't have crashes. People wouldn't buy highly priced assets just because the hype is contagious, and they certainly wouldn't panic sell at the bottom when the price is cheap. What we've learned, especially since the 2008 crisis, is that risk isn't just a spreadsheet. It's a state of mind. The probability that things won't go our way, that's the definition of risk. And how we feel about that probability governs our decisions far more than the math does. If you can't manage your mind, you can't manage your money.
Right. So we're not just dealing with the market's volatility, we're dealing with our own internal volatility. Let's dive into that internal architecture of error, starting with the most destructive force, cognitive biases.
Exactly. Cognitive biases are those mental shortcuts our brain uses, especially under stress, to process information quickly. They save energy, but they actively sabotage our financial results.
The poster child for this, thanks to Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, is loss aversion. Can you break down the power of that bias for us?
Loss aversion is fascinating and incredibly potent. The core finding from their prospect theory is that the psychological pain of a loss is about 2 times more powerful than the pleasure derived from an equivalent gain. I'll give you a simple analogy. Imagine you flip a coin. If it's heads, you win $100. If it's tails, you lose $100. Rationally, it's a neutral bet. But most people won't take it because the potential pain of losing $100 outweighs the joy of winning $100.
Wow, so how does that play out in an investor's portfolio?
It's the reason investors make 2 huge common mistakes. First, they hold on to losing stocks for far too long. They're desperate to get back to the break-even point just to avoid the pain of realizing a loss. They become risk seekers when they are losing. Second, they sell their winning stocks far too quickly, just to lock in the game before it can disappear. They become risk-averse when they are winning. You end up with a portfolio full of losers and very few long-term winners. It's a tragedy.
That's a powerful insight. And that tendency to cling to our beliefs leads us right into the next major problem, confirmation bias and excess confidence.
Oh, those two are a dangerous pairing. Confirmation bias is when you only seek out, interpret, or favor information that confirms what you already believe. If you're convinced a certain tech sector is going to explode, you'll ignore every report warning of overvaluation and only read the analysts who back your original thesis.
And then excess confidence kicks in.
Precisely. We all think we're above average. Most studies show 80% or more of people believe their investment skills are superior. This optimism leads to 2 things: taking positions that are too large and diversifying insufficiently. I have one actionable tip to counter this, what I call dialectical inversionism. Before you commit to any major financial decision, force yourself to spend 30 minutes actively searching for arguments against your own position. Look at sources you would normally ignore. Because, Alex, managing risk isn't about confirming certainty. It's about managing uncertainty.
That's a great exercise. Let's zoom out now to the collective psychology of the market. You describe market cycles as less about economics and more about pure human emotion, from euphoria to panic.
Absolutely. The professional investor knows their most valuable asset isn't their capital. It's their ability to remain cool-headed when everyone else is losing theirs. Think about the typical market cycle. It starts with skepticism, moves to hope, optimism, and then finally euphoria. Euphoria is the peak risk zone. The news is amazing. Everyone you know is talking about getting rich. Prices are decoupling from fundamentals. This is exactly when the newest investors, the least experienced, pile in.
And then the inevitable happens. The shift from complacency to anxiety, then denial, and finally panic selling.
It's a cascade. It's psychological. The crash isn't triggered by a sudden, massive shift in the global economy, though that's the narrative that gets attached to it. It's triggered by millions of individuals simultaneously deciding that the pain of a larger potential loss is unbearable, and they hit the sell button at any price. The 1929 crash, the 2008 financial crisis, both were defined by the subsequent collective hysteria. Central banks intervene to stabilize markets, yes, but fundamentally they are trying to counteract that psychological factor of systemic distrust.
And speaking of collective action, we have the herding behavior or the fear of missing out, which drives so many poor decisions.
It's an ancestral survival mechanism. If everyone else is running, run first, ask questions later. In finance, that means buying what's trending, the meme stocks, the crypto that's gone exponential, and selling when everyone else is selling. It's the ultimate cost of non-difference. Here's the analogy I use. You are the captain of a ship, and your investment plan is your lighthouse. When the storm, the panic, hits, all the ships around you are frantically racing toward the shore. If you follow the herd, you will be shipwrecked with them. Your job is to ignore the noise and follow the steady, predictable light of your own plan.
That brings us perfectly to the practical steps. How do we build that lighthouse? How do we take these psychological insights and turn them into an actionable defense against our own minds?
It all starts with the written investment plan. This plan isn't just a list of assets. It's an emotional contract with yourself. It defines your goals, your time horizon, and crucially, your maximum drawdown.
I love that term maximum drawdown. Can you explain that for our listeners?
It's the highest percentage loss you're willing to tolerate in your portfolio before you seriously reconsider your strategy. This number needs to be written down and tolerable. When the market inevitably corrects, to say, by 15%, and your primal fear center, your amygdala, is screaming at you to sell everything, you can look at your contract and say, my plan says I don't sell until the drop exceeds 30%, and only if the fundamentals of my investments have changed. A plan acts as a cognitive anchor.
That eliminates emotion from the critical decision-making point. What about protecting individual investments? Do you believe in hard rules like stop losses?
For long-term investors, I advocate for the stop-loss mental. It's a psychological limit. If you know in advance exactly how much you are willing to lose on a single position, say 15%, you have given yourself permission to accept that loss if it occurs. It transforms the loss from a personal failure into a simple operating cost of doing business. This prevents emotion from turning a small loss into a catastrophe.
That's brilliant. And finally, you have a simple test for our listeners to check their true risk tolerance.
Yes, the night of sleep test. It's very simple. If the prospect of your portfolio dropping by 10% next week would keep you up at night, your true risk tolerance is lower than you think. You must adjust your exposure so you can sleep soundly. An investor who sleeps well, Alex, is an investor who manages risk well. Also, practice dollar cost averaging, DCA. Automate your investments. It's a powerful psychological tool because it removes the temptation of market timing, which is another common and costly bias.
Jordan, this has been incredibly insightful. If I had to summarize the key takeaway for our audience, it would be this. Success in investing isn't about avoiding losses. It's about knowing how to lose small and how to let your winners run long. It all comes back to discipline.
Absolutely. The investor who constantly applies a methodology and acts against his most primal emotional instincts, that's the investor who wins in the long term. Your plan is your coach. Respect it and let it be your firmest ally when fear and greed come to calling.
Dr. Jordan Hayes, thank you so much for sharing your expertise on the Insight Report.
My pleasure, Alex.
And to all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more deep dives into the forces shaping your world. Until then, stay disciplined and manage that investor within.